This is the first time we've been up Highway 13. That was an airstrike. First time we've been up on this road for the last week.
For the past 40 years, I've watched the warmongers find better ways of killing. Their weapons have changed, but so has something else. We who report it have become casualties too. Now, they are shooting the messenger.
Right, let's get away. Come on, quick.
When you start in this business of reporting wars and conflicts, what some have nicknamed the destruction business, you can convince yourself that you are somehow immune. We're not combatants, we say. We're on nobody's side. The shells and the bullets are not for us. We have that comforting notion that because of the word press on the side of our vehicles and our cameras, it's our insurance policy. We are protected. But not today. Today the word press could kill you.
The kidnapping and beheading of the American correspondent Daniel Pearl in Pakistan shocked the world.
So did the murder of the Russian reporter Anna Politkovskaya.
Their deaths made the headlines.
But in the last 18 months alone, over 100 journalists and cameramen have been killed worldwide. 100.
Newsrooms like ITN's in London send their reporters and camera crews to the fighting wherever it happens, whatever the dangers.
The United Nations and NATO say that the punitive...
There was a time when we were regarded as impartial spectators on nobody's side. But then we too were targeted. Perhaps it began in the war in Bosnia, and perhaps it was our fault. Given its shocking savagery, it became more and more difficult for us to ditch our humanity and maintain our neutrality.
It's now 7 o'clock in the morning and this hotel, which is surrounded by Serb militia, is still under attack.
There was a significant change in the Balkan War when, I think for the first time perhaps, journalists began to be targeted. Some journalists were seen as extensions of the government of the country from which they came, rather than independent journalists working to try and uncover the truth in an independent and courageous manner.
All sides began to accuse us of no longer being impartial, of supporting one faction against the other. They were wrong. But then in the invasion of Iraq in 2003, we were compromised further. To protect us, but really to protect themselves, the military took us firmly under their wing. They called it embedded. It meant that you went where they wanted you to go, see what they wanted you to see, in the hope that you would report what they wanted you to report.
Being embedded with Allied troops can actually take you to the point of the spear, places you couldn't possibly go,
Sure.
Acting as an independent. But independents who are not embedded are able to go their own way and to give a perspective which is unadulterated on the conflict that they're covering.
That's the best bit.
Terry Lloyd was a veteran ITN reporter, and his crew was one of the first independent, non-embedded teams to operate in Iraq.
Tributes to ITV's Terry Lloyd, killed in Iraq fighting. Good evening. We're sad to report tonight that one of our correspondents, Terry Lloyd, is believed to have been killed while reporting on the war in Iraq.
Terry and his team were caught in crossfire. They were first wounded by Iraqi forces, but it was finally the shells from an American tank that killed them.
From all the evidence, that it is very likely that one member of Red Platoon deliberately shot Terry in the head while he was in the back of an ambulance that was moving away from the battle space. that man deserves to be in a court of law. We're not going to get there because the Americans simply will not release the information or the person. Up until the time that we lost Terry, I think there was a false feeling, as it turned out, of invulnerability. And so you kind of did think, really, that we'd be okay. And we were very careful to make sure that we sent only experienced people into dangerous situations. But there were times when you could almost clearly draw a front line on a particular conflict and know where that front line was. In the case of Terry and his team, we thought we knew where that line was. They thought they knew where that line was, and inadvertently they crossed it.
If there was another occasion when you could send two reporters to a war zone, one is embedded and therefore relatively safe, and one like Terry, who can go off as a kind of almost a maverick on his own, would you still do that,
yes,
knowing what happened to Terry?
Yes, I would. You know, he was doing what he wanted to do. We'd given him and his team the best preparation we possibly could. We felt that the mission he was on was journalistically worthwhile. And, you know, 10 seconds either way of the incident and they would have survived.
Yeah.
But, of course, I still feel guilty. 5 years on, I can't shake that off, and I never will.
Terry, cameraman Fred Nerak, and translator Hussein Osman were the first journalists to die in the war.
Another victim was the Iraqi journalist Atwar Bajat. She was a popular news reporter for Al Arabiya television. She was known for the passion and professionalism of her reporting, and it was probably what killed her. Her mother was a Shia, her father a Sunni, but there were no divided loyalties in this reporter. She was loyal to her country, and she despaired as she watched it being ripped apart.
Atwar was an Iraqi who was watching her own country invaded, coming under occupation, and all of the things that came with that occupation. Every single Iraqi was watching avidly to find out what was happening to themselves and to their country.
She was there right amongst it, as the post-war peace disintegrated.
I know she was abducted, I know she was taken, and I know she was shot. I do think that Atwar was especially targeted because she was a journalist, because she was out there on the front lines, visible, a woman on television that everyone could see every day. She was famous. She was saying what was happening in the country, and if you told the truth about what was happening in Iraq at that time, you would upset extremists on all sides.
2 years ago, when the Sunnis attacked the Shia al-Askari shrine in Atwar's hometown of Samarra, her despair turned to anger. Iraqi fighting Iraqi. This, she said, was the one story she had to cover herself. It would be her last.
The day that they blew that up, I mean, it was almost like when they killed Atwar, it was almost like a match for the shrine. It was almost as if they had just killed Iraq. It's like they had killed what Iraq is. It's a country where you have Christians and Muslims and Shias and Sunnis. It's this amazing, amazing ancient country with all of these different communities in it. I really felt like they were targeting people like Atwar. They were targeting Iraq itself. Iraq itself is...
In April 2003, Sami Al-Haj, a Sudanese cameraman working for Al Jazeera Arabic TV, was seized by the Pakistanis on the Afghan border. He was held on suspicion of being involved in terror and handed over to the American forces, who imprisoned him in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba.
The allegation is that he received training as a terrorist because he was trained as a cameraman with Al Jazeera. Like so much of the intelligence, and I use the word intelligence loosely here, of this war on terror, they were wrong. But they grabbed Sami, thinking that he would give them information about bin Laden, and the folk in Guantanamo, I think, honestly believe that Sami's a terrorist. They're crazy. He's no more a terrorist than my granny.
In May, after more than 6 years in detention, he was released without charge.
I've been waiting for this moment for the past 7 years, and I wish my family could have been here with me, but this is fate. I want to highlight the reasons for my detention. One of the reasons was to silence the work of free media.
We know where we want to go. We know what we are doing. First and foremost, we are a Zimbabwean people.
For the past 28 years of independence, Zimbabwe has descended into bankruptcy, starvation, chaos.
Their rights must be respected. Their right over land.
And presiding over it,
It's their land after all. It's their
the man who
home,
promised so much,
their forest.
Robert Mugabe.
Their everything in Zimbabwe.
Once the breadbasket of Africa, it now relies on foreign aid simply to survive. Mugabe clings to power as Zimbabwe hemorrhages. A third of his countrymen have fled elsewhere. Mugabe has ignored all elections that did not elect him. Opposition has been brutally crushed. The rule of law abandoned. Many thousands, white and black, have been killed.
For successful leadership,
Morgan Tsvangirai, leader of the opposition MDC party, won at this year's parliamentary polls,
including one in violence.
but first he had to survive a beating by Mugabe's ruthless secret police.
It was a horrible assault.
Well, it was a violent, sadist attack on defenseless people.
These are just a few of those who have suffered brutal beatings and torture for raising their voices against this regime. Many have not survived it. Mugabe has total control of the press. Opposition newspapers are banned, so are foreign-based journalists. Get caught here, and it's prison. The only real opposition comes from outside.
If I send them a PDF of the front page of the Sunday, they can give us the number today.
Yeah, and also the
8,000 miles away, in their small house in southern England,
yeah, that's a great picture.
Wilfin Banga and his wife Trish edit the Zimbabwean. They use 2 computers and rely mostly on email contributors. Then they lay out the paper and send it off to be printed at a press near the Zimbabwe-South African border.
You see, we took advantage of the law. The AIPA law is silent on newspapers published outside the country. And in fact, South African newspapers and British newspapers have always been read in Zimbabwe.
Even now?
Even now. So we registered the company in South Africa, and we print in South Africa and truck the papers into Zimbabwe.
From a shed in Mikado, just inside South Africa, 3 editions of the Zimbabwean, each with a run of 100,000 copies, are printed here every week. Then they're distributed throughout Zimbabwe. It's a sellout. On May the 24th, Wilf's precious cargo crossed the border. But 200 miles inside Zimbabwe, the truck was hijacked and burnt. 100,000 newspapers were destroyed, and the truck's drivers were badly beaten.
You know that, they can arrest you anytime for any offense. I mean, they've got a whole lot of laws on their side. Sometimes, even when they don't have the law on their side, they can still arrest you. Gift Piri, one of our reporters, our chief reporter, was arrested last year in March and beaten up very badly by the police. He was tortured over 5 days. And to this day, he's receiving psychological counseling. Mark Shavunduka, again, like Gift, he was taken to hospital after his torture, and he never recovered from that. And a year later, he died from chest pains. He had been subjected to waterboarding.
Water torture?
Yeah.
Holding your head underwater?
They put a cover over his head and poured water over it until they were simulating drowning. And he never recovered from that.
Across the border in Johannesburg, exiled Zimbabwean journalists watched the slow destruction of their country, helpless spectators on the sidelines.
I remember very well from that period a number of journalists were being abducted, so it wasn't safe for me, especially that they knew where I was staying and they were constantly visiting my place. So I saw it, I was in danger, so I had to move out of the country.
I was beaten until such a time I lost consciousness. Until such a time my wife said, no, you have been arrested on 3 occasions, but you have never been taken to court, you have never been found guilt. So what's the purpose of saying in a country whereby each time you come up with a good story, you are arrested, you are beaten? Better leave the country because we still need you.
As long as there's formal censorship, as long as there's state capture of the media, there's no room where I can go back to Zimbabwe. I will only go if there's free press where environment is level.
Good evening, Zimbabwe. Maneru mese lichonenjani lonke, and welcome to Newsroom. My name is Tichao Nasbanda. In the bulletin tonight,
For 2 hours every evening, a small radio station in England, manned by Zimbabweans, broadcast to their beleaguered countrymen.
Was attacked by a mob on Wednesday.
I thought when we set up that if we exposed what was happening, if we created dialogue, if we got the world to be aware of what was going on, then somebody somewhere would do something. I was very naive. I now know that the world does not know what to do when a state goes rogue. There are no mechanisms put in place. And what we have in Zimbabwe is where a government has turned on its own people.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of our programming.
Their transmissions are constantly blocked by Mugabe's censors.
We're kicking off as usual with callback.
The government is trying to shut down information because it's got this belief that if you're not completely for it, then you're the enemy. There's no understanding of positive opposition to government, which is so important in any democracy.
Since 1983, the island of Sri Lanka has been torn apart by a ferocious and bloody civil war. Tamil Tigers are fighting for partition, effectively dividing the island in half. The economy has been shattered. Its tourist trade has all but collapsed. After 25 years of it, they are still counting the cost in lives. Over 100,000 dead. Many again have been maimed for life. Others have just disappeared. And the Tigers' use of the suicide bomb has since made it the choice weapon of extremists worldwide. There's no pretense of a free press here. These journalists risk imprisonment simply demanding the right to work and write as they wish. The government considers any criticism as Tamil propaganda bordering on treason. But dare attack the Tamils, and you might never write again. Both sides in this war consider journalists their enemies.
Journalists in this country has been facing harassment threats, intimidation, abductions and killings. In this situation, when you receive a threat or a harassment and it happens continuously, journalists feel that they are not safe taking regular hours to go home or come to work, and they always try to find a place that they can stay together.
And we have given our common hotline number to all the journalists. So if anyone receive any threat, they can immediately contact us and ask help from us.
This house in the capital, Colombo, is a safe house, a hideaway for those who know they are under threat. Here journalists come and work together, believing there is safety in numbers. They attempt to live a normal life, out of reach of those who would rather have them dead.
If the threat rises, sometimes we can't move freely in outside. Sometimes we can't go home. If we feel it's not comfortable or it's not safe, we have to stay here.
I am a little bit feared, and my family also a little bit feared, and all my relations are now pressurizing me to leave the country.
Either you have to stop your work as a journalist or you have to get out, otherwise you will be killed.
25 years of a war that seems to have no ending. And those who would report it to the outside world remain muzzled, impotent.
If we write the truth, they will lose the public support for this war.